Welcome to the Exceptional Educators Podcast by Friendalytics EDU, where innovation meets inclusion in education. I'm your co-host, Matt Giovanello, the CEO and co-founder of Friendalytics. At Friendalytics, we put special education and English language learners front and center. Our award-winning Friendalytics EDU platform helps streamline progress monitoring, improve communication and compliance, and offers truly personalized learning to your students of all abilities. Each episode of our podcast features candid conversations with district and school leaders, classroom changemakers, edtech founders, and industry executives, all dedicated to transforming learning for each of our students, especially our learners with unique abilities. With a focus on extraordinary educators and the exceptional students they serve, we explore the latest in special education, assistive technology, and inclusive leadership. In this episode, Exceptional Educators is exceptionally thrilled to welcome Lisa Hartman, the Director of Curriculum, Instruction, and Assessment at the Lewis Central Community School District in Iowa, right on the Nebraska border near Omaha. Lisa leads the district's efforts to align teaching, learning, and assessment to support every student's growth. And her work helps ensure teachers have the tools, data, and professional learning necessary to drive those outcomes. Lisa, welcome to the podcast. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me, Matt. I'm excited to be on.
Absolutely. It's so fun. Happy Friday. I'm glad that we're here today. We have an opening question for you, Lisa, that we ask all of our guests. That question is, what is your why? What brought you into this world of education? You've been here a minute. What's keeping you here? And what is getting you excited about your role in education going forward?
Oh, great question. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Freedom Writer's Diary, but I watched that movie and there's this scene where the teacher talks about your home. And it's just a really emotional scene and it just inspired me. I was trying to think about what to do with my life at the time. And it was like, I want to be able to be that for kids. I want to be able to be this space where kids can be themselves and have a safe space, And so then teaching was a second career for me. I went back to school and I loved every second of it. And as soon as I became a teacher, I was like, I want to do this forever. So then my why has continued to become like, how can I impact education more? So, that's when I became a principal. And then now at the district office, the why you become more of a systems leader, but the why is still the same of having that like positive impact on kids, And I think that's still what inspires my why is sometimes when the world seems to get crazier, I feel like you can always come back to like, but the kids, like, what can I do to support kids and to make their lives better and to help make sure that they have the best possible future that they can have? I mean, it seems so idealistic sometimes, but at the same time, like, I just like what better purpose to serve than trying to do great things for kids.
And inspire the next generation. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think when the going gets tough, Lisa, I'm sure you would agree with this sentiment that many of us share across this field of you need to go back to your why and remind yourself of how and why you originally committed to this to get you through those tough times. And when you've overseen every grade level and a myriad of roles, you need to connect back to that. Otherwise, you might either lose it or be like, too far removed from this, I might as well jump ship entirely.
I agree. And I think sometimes you see on like the teacher talk of like, if I have to answer one more time, what is my why? But I think you nailed it because I think like when things get hard, I mean, that's why it comes up. That's why people say that is because when things get hard, you do have to tap back into that. Like we all remember some spark that made us get into this in the first place. And when you're in the thick of it and things are hard, it's easy to lose sight of that. But yeah, like when you come back to that, it does. It helps kind of reignite that fire, I think.
You mentioned you started as a teacher. You hinted at just a few of the many roles that you've held across K-12 and pre-K-12. You were an assistant principal, and then at one of your local AEAs, you were the Director of Educational Services, and now you hold this title back at a district of Director of Curriculum, Instruction, and Assessment. So tell us about that arc, how you pivoted from position to position, if you have a favorite one, and how you kind of got into the role that you have present day, just to inspire those who were that classroom teacher in their first position, trying to aspire to join a district or a local agency.
Yeah. So when I was a teacher, again, like I loved it. I loved being a teacher, and I taught in a district that was mostly Hispanic students. So and I got to do some ELL classes. I love learning about a culture that was different than mine, about kids' experiences that were different than mine. Like I say all the time, like I probably learned more from them than they learned from me, so I loved it. And again, like I was just so inspired by teaching that I was like, I know I want every door open to me in education. So I went back to school to get my doctorate. I actually was going through a divorce and I needed something to do. And since then, I've read Sheryl Sandberg, who used to be at Facebook, like #2 person. She has a book called Option B, but she talks about her husband passing away and she went through this kind of phase of growth afterwards, and she calls it post-traumatic growth. And I was like, whoa, like I totally identify with that, because that's when, like, going through a divorce is when I went and got my doctorate degree. Once I had it, I was like, I need to do something with this. So then that's when I started looking for a principal position. Is a very small district. The demographics were complete opposite of where I was teaching. But I learned a ton, because in a small district, I was the curriculum director, the ELL director, the media specialist, the tag coordinator, the special ed director, you're all the things in a district that size. And we had a part-time superintendent. And so I got to do a lot of things that were probably more superintendent level things. So, I mean, it was a great opportunity. That district unfortunately dissolved just due to population and some things that were going on at the time. So that it was like, I need to find another job, which led me to a great district in the middle of Iowa. I got to be the assistant principal and then the principal. I love the community, but I will say those were the hardest jobs I've had in education. Your transition from classroom teacher into administration is such a leap, and it is not the same. Like, you are now managing adults and you are managing conflict all day long. Like, it's student to student conflict, it's parent to teacher conflict, it's teacher to teacher conflict, and then it's all these people also having conflict with you, so it's just like, it's so wildly different than what it is as a classroom teacher. And I like the concept of, I'm potentially with my leadership impacting more people, which is impacting more kids. But I, at the time, just didn't have great ways to manage the stress. And it just really took a toll on me that just wasn't positive. So that's when I then looked to the AEA and became an educational service unit, basically, and then became a director of educational media services there. And it was fine, but it was a lot of meetings. It was, it was a lot of like, how do I get the work done? Because I'm in meetings all the time. Politically in Iowa, there was a lot of things happening with area education agencies. And so I saw the writing on the wall and was like, it's time to think about doing something different. And so that's when, took on this job. I'm in year 4 of this job. And I mean, besides teaching, this has been one of my favorites because it is a lot of building systems as a curriculum director. I get to do a lot with professional development. I just get to get my hands in like a lot of different things. This is a perfect sized district. I feel like it's about 3,000 kids. We have 4 buildings. So it's easy for me still to like get to the different buildings, and it's easy for me to build relationships with teachers, and it's easy for me to find different like pockets to work, and there's not as much red tape. I mean, there's a little bit, but not a ton in a district this size. So you can be nimble and quick and move some things. And so, yeah, it's been there's been lots of different things I've gotten to get my hands on, lots of different types of student populations, but it's kind of fun to talk about it and think about the journey, but it's been kind of a fun journey to be on.
It's a wild journey, and I'm glad that it was a fun one. In retrospect, hindsight's always 2020 of, oh, maybe I wouldn't have taken on that assistant or principal job had I known that there were these grander opportunities available to me, or ones that would be, to kind of summarize what I think you were just getting at, Lisa, the best of both worlds, where you get to affect such change and be close to the classroom and close to building leaders without necessarily being one. And yet you can take a step back and look at the bigger picture across the district and affect systems change, which I know you're a big proponent of. So I feel like this latest role, a really fun one, and you're able to just get so much done along the way.
For sure. And I think it is like literally like the best of both worlds in a curriculum director position, because it's like, I get to work hand in hand a lot with the superintendent and do a lot of things at district level, but also like, I'm not the superintendent, so I don't have the stress that comes with that and some of the high level things. And it is, some days it's like, this is pretty good.
Touche. I'm sure they would feel the other way as well. For our superintendent friends being like, I don't know if I love this spotlight on me.
Yeah.
But going back to a comment we just brought up together before about systems, I know you're a big systems person, creating them, sustaining them, collaborating with others to bring them into this world, into existence. And, the longer the project, if it's multi-year, like you're like, sign me up. So talk us through a couple of those recent systems pieces that you built out, whether it's new programming, whether it's new professional development opportunities at Lewis Central, and kind of walk us down the path of from inception to the actual final product, because we don't get to see and get a front row seat to these kinds of conversations every day?
What a great question. Yes, I love, 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 love systems. And part of it is because like I've seen them work. Like I've been part of organizations where when you put systems in, that this is what gets things moving. And the second part is I feel like we've probably all been in organizations where you see people start to lead some change, but sometimes it hangs just on them or their leadership or their skill or their expertise. So then when they leave or retire, everything falls apart. And to me, the legacy that I want to leave one day is that I'm able to support places to put systems in that like are able to continue to thrive and grow long after I'm gone. And that doesn't mean that systems don't change or get updated, but just like if I'm not building those systems, what am I doing? But I think to start with thinking about how to answer this question, like I think somebody who's building systems, like you have to think long term. And sometimes I see educational leaders who are just very short term thinkers, and it's really hard to build effective systems if you're just focused on right now. And so to be a systems thinker, to start building systems, like you got to think about, yeah, where are we going this year? But you also do have to think about what are we doing and where are we going in the next 3 years, the next 5 years, So I think starting with that, the data piece is a huge thing to start with when we're thinking about systems. So let's see, I'll think of an example. Right now, I mean, there's a lot of literacy stuff, right? And I think lots of districts can probably relate to literacy things. In most states, there's more and more pressure with literacy because of state level guidance. So right now in our district, I mean, we have kind of had an eye on what's happening for a while. So like when you look at the state level, and again, this is probably a lot of different states, but they've been promoting heavily science of reading and letters training. So here in our district a couple of years ago, we internally trained some people to be facilitators of letters. And that's allowed us to be flexible and provide our own in-house training. It's also allowed us to like save some money. So it's building some of that knowledge and training, but then at the same time, thinking systems level, it's like you can't just provide professional learning. Like, what are we doing with this? So we've built in a couple other things. Like, one is this district literacy plan that now a lot of districts are really being directed by the state to do that. But like we saw beforehand, like that's just good practice. And also, like as we were bringing on new teachers, or as teachers started to think about more about science of reading, they're like, so what's our district's philosophy? What's our district's approach to that? What are our district's goals? What are our district's plans to get there? And it's like, ooh, we should probably put that together. And I'm big on collaborative leadership. I never want it to be Lisa's thing. So I like getting teams of people together and we're going to develop this and grow together. And I think one of the strengths I've developed as this person who is responsible for systems is to be a great facilitator. Again, like so many of these meetings, it's like, I don't want the outcome to be what I think and believe. I mean, that'd be awesome. But at the same time, like, I want to be the facilitator of bringing all of these people with these backgrounds and skills and knowledge together. And sometimes that might mean we need to build some shared knowledge together. But then, like, what is the group going to create together? And so this district literacy plan is one that's kind of the backbone of some of our systems. And it really started elementary. And then our secondary teachers were like, when do we get in on this? So like we're almost done now. We're creating this plan with them. And then in the meantime, then this is all connected to, we have a district leadership team goal, and that goal is on literacy. And that is because of stakeholder feedback, which the board identified was a priority. So then they've got this goal around literacy. We're matching some things with this district literacy plan. And then at the same time, now we've started moving forward with our process for our curriculum review around literacy. And it's all like just kind of like in this like continuous improvement cycle, and everything's being tied together. And so again, big pieces are the data for all of it. It's looking at data, it's building shared knowledge, it's thinking 3 to 5 years down the road, and it's thinking about some of those critical pieces, like where does the professional learning fit in, who's getting it, when are they getting it. The implementation piece, I've just seen in this role as a curriculum director how we can have the best laid plans, but if you're not thinking about implementation or implementation science, like how things can completely fall apart. Also, that change management, we've all probably seen that matrix of like when you have some of the gaps and you're not thinking about certain things with change management. Like these are real people that you're dealing with when it comes to systems or a change in a system. And so you do have to be considerate. So even like with literacy right now, like the state is basically signaling to us this shift away from balanced literacy into structured literacy. It's there. They've signaled it with how they've revamped the standards. It's there with they're no longer supporting teacher prep programs that have balanced literacy. So there's all these signs about some shifts that districts need to think about. And so then I think about that while we're still 2 years away from adopting a curriculum, but what groundwork do we need to be laying with our people right now so that we can start to think about some of those pieces that come with change management or being a human being and having feelings about what we've used in the past. And it's just that longer term thinking. So I don't know. I feel like I've talked probably about lots of different pieces and places within what it takes for systems. But I think that's the best example we have right now is just literacy. It's so big. You have to break it down and start somewhere. And then you have to just start connecting the dots with lots of different things. And has to be not about you, but about bringing those voices to the table and supporting that development of what that system's going to be.
Well, I think there's a lot of pieces here, Lisa, and it goes to show literacy is an excellent example for your district and many others of the magnitude of adopting or embracing or starting a new project and how it touches literally every single aspect of your district and everybody within it. This is not just an administrative change. This is not just a building leader change, not just a staff member change. It's affecting students, parents, the community members, board members, everybody in between, and it needs to be treated as such. This is not a fly-by-night operation. You can't like fly by the seat of your pants when you're adopting a new literacy set of standards and a new curriculum. Like this is a multi-year effort. And I think that from the outside, it could be tough for some people to be like, why does it take forever and a day for districts to adopt change? And I think you're giving the answer why of there's so many pieces to consider. And even if not all of them are awfully visible, they are happening. And to do this in a sustainable and responsible way, these pieces need to be executed on as a part of broader systems thinking and systems change. There are a couple of pieces that like rose to the surface for me that I'd like to get into a bit more detail on. The first is your opinion and philosophy on evangelizing and empowering your building leaders and your teachers to adopt and embrace change almost voluntarily instead of it being like, this is the Lisa mandate, follow me or else. I think we well know the difference in outcomes if you take that latter approach versus the former one. How are you specifically empowering and evangelizing your staff to want to come on board with you? And how are you doing it in phases so that you can test things out before you're going full scale?
Well, first, there's another kind of system that we have in place in this district, and it's our teacher leadership system. And so we've got in place already this process for teacher leadership where teachers are taking on these leadership roles, whether it's their building leadership team, district leadership team. It's been kind of fun when we bring on new people because they're always shocked that, like, our district leadership team is half and half teachers and administrators. So any big high level district level goal decision making is done in tandem with teachers. And so we are very fortunate because we kind of have this culture here of teacher leadership. And I remember when I first came in, like we have a teacher leadership group and it's called Oversight. And it is teachers that sit on this committee with administrators, and the Oversight Committee is making decisions about our teacher leadership program. And I was like, we could just get rid of that. Like, I'm supervising the teacher leadership program. Like, we don't need the Oversight Committee. Like, I can just make decisions. And people were like, excuse me, no. They're like, we've always had this. Teachers really appreciate that they are a voice, even a voice when it comes to what teacher leadership in our district looks like. And I was like, oh, okay, but like they were so right. Like, and it is so important and critical. And it is part of our culture of what we do and how we operate. So like, I'm fortunate that I stepped into that like that was already functioning at Lewis Central. And I think I've just seen, like you alluded to also, like we've all probably lived in situations where somebody's just making a top-down decision. And listen, like sometimes that does just need to happen. Sometimes we don't have time, or sometimes something is urgent and does have to be a top-down decision, but those usually don't ever feel good. And the long-term effects of that is usually not great. So I'm huge on that of just how can we work together to build something together, because again, just the long-term outcome is so much better. And it is not fun to take an approach where you're just going to come out and say, like, this is what we're using. We're going to use this curriculum. I've decided this is what we're going to do. The legwork then that goes into the other side of that, potentially, of then like trying to convince people why this is a good idea. And I've just seen the power of teacher leadership when you can be transparent and say, this is the process we went through. Here's what your peers did. And then when you've got great teacher leaders who are respected back in their buildings, and those teacher leaders are able to say, this is what we did, here's what we chose, here's why I like it, here's what I'm seeing in my classroom, and just how you can build that momentum. It's just so much more powerful to build that into your systems approach.
And I think what you're getting at, Lisa, is that convincing is happening one way or another. Like, you want to make sure that you're getting buy-in from your staff who are participating or otherwise required to be adopting all of these systems changes. And if you do it in more of a partnership way and an evaluative way at the beginning, your
Yeah.
successes could be that much grander than if you're convincing them after a decision's already been made, where they're now spiteful because it was made without them. And you need to get them on
Yeah.
board one way or another. There's a proven better way that at Lewis Central, at least, you've done that than, the alternative. So I'm glad that continues to stay. And despite your efforts of trying to disband that committee, at least early on in your days, understandably so, your teachers fought back, and good on them, because you're now
Yeah.
seeing the merits of it too.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's get into another example using the STEAM framework of systems change. It may not be as expansive of an example compared to literacy, but I know that another cultural norm at Lewis Central is supporting, growing, and retaining your paraprofessional population.
Mhm.
So let's get into that a little bit more. How did that become a priority? And what are you doing within the district to support, hire, retain, and grow those paras, knowing that they play such a pivotal role in your students with unique learning needs?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the exciting things about like going from teacher to administrator is like seeing more of the system, and seeing how everything fits together. Obviously, you understand as a teacher how powerful paraprofessionals are, but just to think about that as a system. And so, in this role, one of the things I get to do is oversee professional development. And so, one of the things I quickly started to think about, and there's other people in the district too that have been thinking about this. And so, we put our brains together on this, was just about that role of the paraprofessional. Like, they are sometimes working with some of our most challenging kids and in the most challenging situations. And you think about in a lot of districts, like it's just like, okay, there you go, good luck. And it's like, well, where's the support for them, And so we actually were inspired by another district in Nebraska. There was a big news story about how they'd put on this para conference, and we're like, that sounds really cool. And kind of at the same time, this grant became available through the University of Iowa as a mental health grant. And we had several paras who were very excited about that, went and got some learning, came back, had some grant money left over, met with some paras, met with some teachers. What are we going to do with this money? And so one of the big things that came up was professional development. And so that first year, then we built this para conference. We had Leanne Jung. She is phenomenal. She came in as a guest speaker. She does a lot about universal design for learning. And she was phenomenal. She took a whole day of that para conference and did some training and learning. The feedback was incredible from the paras. They just loved it. I feel like they also felt appreciated, that like this was just for us, because we talked about like, do we invite teachers? And it was like, no, we want to keep this special just for our paraprofessionals. So then we did it again this year, and we invited in a couple other districts. So that was kind of cool to be able to, some of the smaller districts don't have the same resources. So to be able to open that up for them. But then we talked about just what does the sustainability of this look like with para learning, because conferences are great, but it's like a one and done, So then we also, this is year 3 of doing once a month district-wide para training. So they still get training back in their buildings, but we wanted to bring them together to get to know the other paras across the district. Like, how can they support each other just by building some of those relationships? And then they provide feedback on some of the things that they want to see. So it's been things like how to support students with IEPs on academic goals, how to think about de-escalation and what that looks like, just learning about some different disabilities. And so then we kind of tap some other people in our district who might be experts in that, could be teachers, could be instructional coaches, principals, and ask them to facilitate some learning with the paraprofessionals once a month. So I think it's unique. I don't see a lot of other districts that have dedicated some time and thinking to what does support and learning look like for paraprofessionals, but we're really proud of that. And, hopefully that's can kind of be a recruitment tool too, that, hey, look, Lewis Central cares and supports about the growth and development of their paraprofessionals. It is something that you hope that paras feel like this district is supportive of me and my growth, and this is a place that I would want to stay because of that.
My guess is yes, it does. I'm sure there is a positive correlation between this investment in your paraprofessionals and the retention levels from school year to school year as maybe a secondary effect. But the
Yeah.
primary reason, if I'm understanding your approach to this correctly, is regardless of retention, which yes is important, but for the time that you do have these paraprofessionals with you, you're maximizing their
Yeah.
capabilities, upskilling them, and allowing them to service your students with these really challenging needs as effectively as they can. And that is, every paraprofessional's dream and everyone who works in special education's dream of being able to best meet the needs of their students and help them grow along the way. So regardless of if they're staying 1 year or 5 or 20 or more, for the time that they're there, they're actually doing the best work that they can for their students. And if that's the only outcome alone, I feel like mission accomplished.
Yeah, totally nailed it. And I think that I have seen just some like growth mindset shifts happen too within our paraprofessionals. Like, for example, we have some instructional coaches and their focus is on behavior support. And I met with one of them the other day and she was like, I've got paraprofessionals coming to me and asking, like, can I come observe them and collect some data on some of the strategies and things that they're doing and give them feedback? And I'm like, how freaking cool is that? Like, they don't have to do that. Paraprofessionals don't necessarily have like growth plans or PD plans they have to fill out. Nobody's telling them they have to do that, but they're taking it upon themselves to connect to a resource in our district and be like, can you help me? I'm like, that's freaking cool.
It's really, really cool. I'm glad that you shared that example. And to go back to something you mentioned before, from my vantage point too, I think it is unique. I haven't heard a lot of stories like this where districts, especially of your size, are saying, let's prioritize and embrace paraprofessionals as an important puzzle piece to the special education journey and supporting students in that way. So kudos, I think it's really cool. And I'm glad that we got to unpack that a little bit and hopefully have this story show as an example of inspiration for districts who may want to prioritize this as well, but may not necessarily know where to begin. I think you gave some really good thoughts there.
Yeah.
In a related capacity, we are talking about, especially towards the beginning, your relatively high English language learner population as well. And so in your role as Director of Curriculum, Instruction, and Assessment, how are you thinking about embedding equity into decisions being made at the district level so that students in these programs, in special education programs, and those in your general education programs as well, they're all feeling seen, supported, heard, and also challenged in their work, even if they do have a little bit of headwinds to their growth?
Yeah, great question. It is something we talk more and more about is our ELL population, our tag population, our students with IEPs, and what does that look like? And I think, I mean, ground zero for this for me is like on the curriculum standpoint and what that looks like for equity. And we've done a lot of things that's all connected to systems work, our MTSS work. We've done a lot of work with kind of using that solution tree framework, but just thinking about what equity looks like in classrooms. And so, it goes back to that whole thing of like, if I go in your classroom and I go in the classroom next door and I've got two kids who are twins, can I make sure that they're having the same kind of experience? Obviously, as teachers, we're still bringing the art of teaching and, some of our strategies might look a little bit different, but we have invested a lot into thinking about what are our essential standards, that work of Larry Ainsworth is really the model that we've followed. But like, again, if you think about what standards look like, you cannot, I mean, they've done studies about like the hours of time that it would take to really make sure and ensure that all kids deeply know all of those standards. It's impossible. So thinking about like, what are the essentials? It doesn't mean we don't teach the other standards, but we're going to guarantee that these kids all have this. And I think that's really helped us because when you then think about that equity conversation, like if we're going to guarantee these, that means all kids. So then like what scaffolds do we need to put in? How do we modify some things? And then from there, building what are your common formative assessments? And now your PLCs can have really great conversations about this was the assessments that we use. Oh, your class, this is how they performed. Oh, mine not so much. What strategies did you use? What can I learn from that? And I think that's just such a basic thing, but it is such a basic thing when it comes to equity, because if those things aren't in place, I feel like now we start to see a lot of inequities between classrooms. And so I think it's really got to start with just putting some of those in, and it's a lot of systems, it's a lot of structures. But seeing that transition happen in our district, I do feel a lot more comfortable just with that equity conversation and what's happening for kids.
Absolutely. And something that's an underlying theme, Lisa, is among all of these conversations about systems, that you also have supports in place to measure the efficacy and outcomes of these systems and all of the changes that you're doing within them. So let's put a fine point on that. What do you have in place right now, whether it's collaboration amongst these different classroom environments and from building to building to know what outcomes look like and that there's consistency there, and all the way up to the district level? What things are in place to measure outcomes of these different initiatives? Are you collecting data in a particular way? Do you have these forums where teachers are able to share more anecdotal stories? Are you doing a combination of both? Something else? What does that look like?
Yeah, another really good question, because we worked really hard on this as a district. And a couple years ago, our district leadership team read this book called The Four Disciplines of Execution. And that has really resonated with us and stayed with us. And so, one of the things in that book, they talk about having a scoreboard. And it is so cool because a lot of pockets have kind of caught on to this whole like scoreboard idea. And in fact, the middle school, I wish I had it up so I could like show you, but like they painted on their wall their scoreboard. Because one of the things they talk about is like making your scoreboard public. Like it shouldn't be a secret. Like we should be transparent about our scoreboard. And so it's so cool. But like it all really started with the district level. So the district leadership team getting clear on like what are our goals, and then to your point, like how are we measuring that? And our superintendent's been big about that too, about like we can't just throw a goal out there and like not have a way to measure it. Like how is this going to
Right.
be a
Just hope it
smart?
happens. Hope and
Yeah,
prayer is not
yeah.
getting you very far.
Exactly. Like making it that SMART goal, making it a goal that like we have things that we're going to measure and look at. The four disciplines of execution also talks about lead and lag measures. And so we've worked really hard on that too, because you have your measures that you're going to look at the very end of the year. But if that's all you're ever looking at, then how do you know like what to change or what to put pressure on along the way? So we've kind of built that out too, of like what are some of the things we're going to look at along the way. And then that trickles down then to the building leadership teams. And then building leadership teams are looking at that district level goal, their lead and lag measures. Okay, then what are ours going to be and how is that connected? And so we've just seen some really cool things. Like, you kind of transition from this conversation from like that PLC, but like, for example, now in several of our building leadership teams, they're looking at PLC agendas and then they're giving some feedback. And so it's not, and I don't think people receive it like this, but it's not like a micromanaging thing. It's more of just like, this is our feedback loop. And so then at our DLT, we constantly have feedback loops going too. So the building leadership team is bringing up, here's some of the things that we talked about. Here's how it went when we gave feedback on our PLC agendas. The DLT is hearing feedback loops from our like curriculum review committees. So it's just this constant, and we've had good conversations just about what do those feedback loops look like? Where do we need to put feedback loops in? Like what part of the data collection piece is part of that feedback loop? So some of it's anecdotal, but some of it is that data piece. Obviously most schools are doing universal screeners a couple times a year. So it's bringing in those data points. And again, like if you're looking at CFAs at your PLC, then that comes up to your building leadership team. And then to DLT, it's not like we need to know every single thing about your CFA, but just a more broad stroke general picture. So I just think all of that feedback and all of that process like helps build in that accountability, and then making sure that there's teacher voice in it and that we're looking at the data and that we're being responsive to it.
Oh, 1,000%. Now, let's take a hypothetical scenario, Lisa, just to push this a little bit further and say through these feedback loops, whether building leadership is identifying it or it's making its way up to the district as appropriate, you're identifying some sort of misalignment. Things are not stellar with the feedback that you're hearing from your teachers or from your admins. What does that process look like for you? How are you course correcting things? At what point in time have you identified it to be an appropriate time to try and course correct versus maybe gathering more data points or feedback first? And what does that like immediate first step look like if you happen to have a recent example of needing to go through this process?
It's exciting to talk about some of this, but like, I mean, we're not perfect. There's lots of different pieces and things. And I would think this is a place where there's room for improvement, because one of the things I've noticed, like, especially like as feedback comes up to district leadership team, and then thinking like, what's district leadership team's response, that people are nice, and we're in Iowa, there's this Iowa nice, but people are nice. They don't want to hurt people's feelings. So it is some work to think about how to get people to give some hard feedback. You don't have to be mean, but like, we do have these things that we said we're going to accomplish. So what are we noticing and seeing is a lot of the feedback that I see sometimes that goes back down is very positive. And not that, it has to be negative, but to your point of like, but what are we going to like, what are we going to change? What does that look like? So, I mean, I think that is a work in progress for sure. But I think there's certain things, let's just pick literacy, for example. So if we're noticing in the data, like on our universal screener, this doesn't look good. It is coming back and thinking about, well, what does that mean? Does that mean the implementation of our curriculum isn't great and we need to go back and look at that? That comes up quite a bit for us. And then we'll be like, all right, let's do some walkthroughs. Let's look at how curriculum is being implemented. That could be a first starting point. It doesn't always mean that we're right, but it could be a place to start, is like, let's look at curriculum. Let's look at some other places. So we do definitely see some of those things happening, but I do definitely think that that's a growth area of just thinking about how can we still give some feedback, and it doesn't have to be mean, but it supports us in our growth and next steps.
Right, exactly. And I think the reality for everyone everywhere, otherwise you're lying to yourself, is that you're not perfect and there's always room for improvement. Knowing that you're vulnerable enough as a district and a set of leaders to be receptive to that feedback and also dish it back in a productive way is a really critical piece to this entire process. So I'm glad that you're highlighting that.
Yeah.
Lisa, we are somehow at the end of our time already. This went so fascinating. I really enjoyed your perspective today because for our podcast, it's a unique one. I think you hold a lot of positions, but the way that you are so close in the work to affecting change within your district that touches everybody, it was really cool to kind of pull back the curtain and learn a lot more about your process. And hopefully the specifics here are ones that people can act on and implement or be inspired by otherwise to bring within their own roles within districts and schools around the country. So thank you for lending your voice in that way. I have one more question for you before we wrap up today's episode. That question is, what does being an exceptional educator or being an exceptional leader mean to you?
Oh, it's such a good question. I mean, the first thing that comes up is that systems architect. Like, I think if you're in a leadership position and you are impacting buildings, processes, like you have to be a systems architect and think about that. And then I think the other thing too is just that collaboration of, you can't do it alone and you don't always have the best ideas, and the more people you can bring to the table who have different experiences, different skills, different background knowledge, and allow them to be part of the process, I think the better outcomes you're going to have in the long run.
I agree. I think the diversity of opinions and perspectives is crucial here. And I think that could be one of the many keys of how you're successfully supporting your students across pre-K through 12 at Lewis Central. And for that, we thank you. You're an exceptional leader, Lisa. You have just so many wonderful qualities and characteristics that I'm glad that we got to put on full display here today. So thank you for joining us again this morning and lending your voice to this important conversation.
Thank you for having me. This was so much fun.
I enjoy. You're now on the opposite side. Lisa was formerly a podcast host in education, and now today you got grilled as a guest. And A+, you withstood the test.
Yes, thank you.
For everybody listening to today's episode of the Exceptional Educators Podcast, thank you for joining us, and we will see you at the next one.